My family tried to destroy me, but I turned pain into strength and conquered everything. I never imagined that my own family would become my greatest obstacle. I felt tired, emotionally drained, and at the same time, filled with a silent rage that grew daily. Every call from my mother, Ana, and every unexpected visit from Jorge put me on high alert. The excuses, the requests for money, the manipulative arguments. Everything left my heart racing, my breath short, and a feeling of helplessness that consumed me. I remember sitting in my office, surrounded by bills and gym contracts, wondering how it had all come to this. My name is Lucio, I'm 35, and I grew up in North Texas. I always tried to do the right thing, working hard, studying, striving to build something solid in life. And yet, I felt like my every step was being sabotaged by those who should have supported me. The stress began to affect me physically: insomnia, constant tension in my shoulders, migraines. It was as if my body was screaming that it couldn't carry the pressure anymore, but my mind refused to give up. What started as small frustrations snowballed into an emotional snowball, and I knew something needed to change before it was too late. The situation began to worsen when Jorge, my younger brother, and Olivia, his girlfriend, began constantly asking for financial help with increasingly absurd excuses. First, they were small sums for emergencies, then outlandish proposals involving the name of my gym. I felt betrayed and humiliated, especially because I realized my mother always agreed with them, while my father, Jose, remained passive, unaware that he was encouraging their exploitation. What hurt most was how Jorge seemed oblivious to the gravity of what he was doing. He had no understanding of responsibility. I felt a mixture of anger and profound sadness, remembering the nights I'd worked late, dreaming about my projects, and my efforts were completely ignored. My self-esteem began to waver. I questioned my choices and blamed myself for not being able to control the situation. But there was also a point of resistance within me, a flame of justice that told me I couldn't continue being exploited. Every meeting with them, every call asking for money, was a cruel reminder that my own family could be poisonous. I needed to find a way to protect myself without losing my integrity, but the feeling of helplessness felt overwhelming. I clearly remember the day everything changed. I had received an email from Olivia with forged documents, supposedly authorizing the withdrawal of funds from my business account. My heart raced, my breathing became irregular, and I felt a deep, sinking feeling in my stomach. In that instant, I realized this wasn't just emotional abuse. It was a concrete attempt at fraud, to steal what I had worked so hard to build. I felt betrayed, not just by Jorge and Olivia, but by the entire family dynamic that had always allowed this behavior. I shut myself in my office, staring at the wall, trying to process every detail: the papers, the signatures, Olivia's manipulative smile on past visits. It was such a shock that my hands trembled and my mind raced, analyzing every possibility. For the first time, I realized I could no longer simply be patient or generous. I needed to act strategically. But I had to act ethically and effectively, without letting anger overwhelm me. I felt fear, but also a quiet determination. I wouldn't let anyone destroy my life or my business. That feeling of helplessness began to turn into clarity, and I knew I needed to devise a meticulous plan to regain control. For days, I nearly collapsed. Every time Jorge called me, my body reacted automatically. Sweating palms, tight chest, tension in my neck. My mind felt like a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: anger, fear, disgust, guilt. I relived childhood memories when my mother seemed to favor Jorge in everything and neglect me, encouraging irresponsible behavior. The feeling of injustice gnawed at me. At the same time, I thought of Olivia, always elegant, always manipulative, smiling as if she were above it all. I realized how my anger, if misdirected, could harm me even further. It was during this period that I began writing everything down, documenting every contact, every attempted fraud, every financial pressure. It was painful to relive it all, but I needed clarity. Each written line was a way to release the tension, to organize my thoughts and create a concrete strategy. I knew I couldn't simply confront them without proof. At the same time, I reflected on my own behavior. How many times had I been too patient, ignored clear signs of manipulation, and allowed guilt to consume me? I needed to learn to say no, and to trust in the natural justice of things without letting myself be overcome by despair. The decision to change came from a very simple yet profound place. I could no longer be the silent victim. I understood that my life would not be defined by my family, but by the choices I made from that moment on. I was 35 years old, with a chain of gyms, clients who trusted me, employees who depended on my leadership. I couldn't allow myself to be brought down by people who valued nothing but their own interests. I decided to act intelligently, not with uncontrolled anger, but with strategic firmness. I began collecting evidence, organizing documents and correspondence, and planning every step. I felt anxiety, yes, but also a growing sense of power. I was finally in control. For the first time, I thought clearly about the boundaries I needed to set, about how I would no longer be the family ATM that everyone exploited. At the same time, I felt sadness at realizing that my family wasn't what I imagined, that their love was conditioned by their interests. But amidst this pain, I realized something liberating. I could choose my life, my path, without depending on their approval or manipulation. It was the beginning of a profound transformation, which would require resilience, patience, and courage, but which promised a victory far greater than any fleeting revenge. In the following days, my routine changed completely. Every call, every message from Jorge or Olivia filled me with a mixture of anger and caution. I could no longer react impulsively. I sat in my office, breathing heavily, reviewing documents, checking every detail, sometimes until the wee hours of the morning. I remember feeling chest pains from the stress, but also a newfound clarity. I needed to be strategic. Their every mistake would become evidence, every attempt at manipulation would be recorded. Meanwhile, I reflected on my life before all this, on how much I worked alone, on the nights my parents, Ana and Jose, seemed to ignore my efforts while praising Jorge for superficial things. It was as if my entire history of struggle were invisible. But I couldn't let myself be consumed by resentment. I breathed deeply, trying to remember that my goal wasn't emotional revenge, but justice, the protection of my life and my work. This awareness gave me the strength to keep going, even when the pressure seemed unbearable. My body felt tired, but my mind was awakening to something I'd never experienced before: absolute control of the situation. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. A sense that I could finally turn the tide without losing my way. One of the most tense moments was when I realized Olivia was trying to use my brother as a shield to access my company. I felt a mixture of disgust and disbelief. I could feel my heart racing, cold sweat on my hands, that dry throat feeling as if I were about to scream. But I knew I had to control myself. My mind was racing, thinking of every possible reaction, every detail that could be used to my advantage. I remember walking through the gym parking lot, breathing deeply, trying to calm my body and organize my thoughts. I needed to be patient, document each step without letting on that I already knew everything. The sensation was physical, tension in my shoulders, a clenched jaw, as if my entire body was on alert. It was exhausting and distressing, but it also gave me a sense of purpose. Every manipulative phone call, every absurd request from Jorge and Olivia became a step in building my strategy. For the first time, I felt powerful, not through physical strength, but through mental and emotional control of the situation. I knew there was still a long way to go, But each small step was a silent victory, a recovery of my autonomy and dignity. The evidence-gathering phase was painful and meticulous. I spent hours reviewing contracts, emails, and messages, recording everything, often feeling the weight of the injustice of my entire family life. I recalled moments from my childhood when I sacrificed myself for Jorge, when my mother spoiled him and made me feel guilty for complaining. The memory of these situations caused a tightness in my chest, as if the past were pressing down on me. But I realized I could transform this pain into energy for action. Each document was proof, each mistake an opportunity to re-establish my autonomy. I felt a mixture of anxiety, fear, and excitement, as if I were about to cross a dangerous bridge, but knew that on the other side lay freedom. There were times when I wanted to give up, cry on the office floor, scream into the void, but the feeling of helplessness began to dissipate, replaced by strategic confidence. I knew it wasn't about blind revenge, but about justice and protecting what I had built with sweat and dedication. My body felt tense, but my mind felt lighter, as if each conscious action was freeing me from the cycle of manipulation that had trapped me for years. It was an exhausting phase, but crucial for me to finally turn the tables. The turning point came when I decided I didn't need to confront Olivia and Jorge directly. Strategically, delivering information to Olivia's mother was my choice. I remember the butterflies in my stomach, the rapid breathing, the slightly trembling hands as I sent emails detailing each attempt at deception and manipulation. It was as if I was releasing an emotional burden I'd carried for years. I was afraid of how they would react, afraid of judgment, afraid of feeling alone again. But there was also a profound relief, a physical sense that I was doing the right thing. My heart was racing, but I was mentally calm. Every step had been planned, every detail recorded. For the first time, I realized the power of strategy combined with patience. It wasn't about humiliation, but about allowing life's justice to unfold naturally. The physical tension was still there, stiff shoulders, tight chest, but my mind felt lighter. I knew I was protected and that finally my hard work and integrity could prevail. It was a moment of silent victory, a sense that I was no longer at the mercy of manipulation or exploitation. The knowledge that I was in absolute control of the situation brought a mixture of peace and power, something I had never felt before. Jorge and Olivia's reaction was exactly what I expected. Chaos, confusion, and ultimately, consequences. Olivia decided to leave, taking everything she could, but her plan quickly fell apart. Jorge faced bankruptcy, not fully understanding how his actions had led to his downfall. I watched from afar, a lump in my throat, remembering my childhood, the favoritism, the injustice. But this time, I felt no irrational anger, just the understanding that they had to learn the hard way. My body slowly relaxed. The tension in my shoulders began to ease, and my breathing returned to normal. I realized that my patience, strategy, and discipline had been rewarded, and that I could finally breathe without fear of manipulation. The feeling of victory was silent, internal, yet profound, as if every cell in my body knew I had regained my place in the world. For the first time in years, I felt my independence could not be broken by anyone. The physical and emotional learning was intense. Headaches, sleepless nights, and anxiety had transformed into strength and mental clarity. This phase was crucial for me to finally believe that there was a path to overcoming, even when everything seemed lost. Once everything began to settle, I realized the battle wasn't just against Jorge or Olivia, but against years of family patterns that kept me vulnerable. My mother, Anna, even unintentionally, always reinforced favoritism and let me carry blame that wasn't my own. My father, Jose, passive, unwittingly contributed to the exploitation. I felt a mixture of suppressed anger and profound sadness at the realization that my own family could be toxic. Physically, my body still showed signs of stress. a tense neck, aching shoulders, and sleepless nights. But there was something new, a sense of autonomy I had never felt before. One of the biggest challenges after that was rebuilding my relationship with Jorge, or at least accepting that it would never be the same. I felt anger and disappointment, but I also needed compassion to avoid being consumed by resentment. I remember trying to talk to him, observing every expression, every hesitation. His body also seemed tense, but my decision to act strategically had put me in control. Anger no longer dominated me. I could breathe, analyze, and respond clearly. This change was both physical and mental. There was no longer that tight feeling in my chest, no cold sweat, no constant anxiety. I could hear my own voice calmly and feel like I was definitively setting boundaries. At the same time, I felt sad, remembering times when I shielded him from responsibility, and now I saw that he needed to face the consequences to learn. It was painful to accept, but liberating. At the same time, I had to rebuild my self-esteem and confidence in business. Each day involved strategic decisions, reorganizing accounts, and communicating clearly with my team, who were preoccupied with family tensions. I remember endless nights reviewing contracts, analyzing financial reports, and even though I was tired, I felt a quiet satisfaction, realizing I was regaining complete control of my life. It was physical too. My legs ached from walking around the office, my hands numb from typing and reviewing paperwork, but my mind clear and focused. Each small step forward reminded me that my efforts were not in vain. At the same time, the past still haunted me in dreams and memories, but I could breathe and separate what was learned from what was trauma. Feeling that my gym was safe again, that my employees trusted me, and that my independence was preserved brought a mixture of relief and pride that coursed through my body from my chest to my fingers. It was a silent but real, concrete victory that showed that patience, strategy, and resilience can transform even the most painful situations into learning experiences. I also began to realize something I'd never felt before: self-respect. For years, I'd accepted manipulation, emotional blackmail, and silent financial abuse, thinking it was part of family love. But by acting strategically and ethically, I realized that true strength lies in protecting one's own life without violating principles. Ultimately, I learned that overcoming challenges isn't just about overcoming others, but also about overcoming yourself and the patterns that keep us stuck. My story with Jorge, Olivia, Ana, and Jose taught me the importance of clear boundaries, emotional discipline, and strategic resilience. Physically, I felt every muscle in my body relax as my mind freed itself. Sleep returned, and my anxiety diminished. Emotionally, I realized I could feel sadness without letting it consume me, that I could handle disappointment without losing my inner strength. After all the chaos, I began rebuilding my routine with complete focus on myself and my business. Every morning, before even opening the gym doors, I walked around the neighborhood, feeling the sun on my face and trying to internalize that I was finally in control of my life. Family tensions still existed, but now I had clear boundaries. I no longer accepted absurd requests for money or accepted emotional manipulation. This feeling was physical too. More relaxed shoulders, deeper breathing, less muscle tension. My body responded positively to my emotional clarity. Every client who walked in, every employee I greeted with confidence, reinforced that my choices were correct. One of the most complex challenges was dealing with the feeling of betrayal, especially from Olivia. I remember the day I realized she had fled with almost everything she could. My stomach churned, my heart raced, and a mixture of anger and disbelief washed over me. At the same time, something inside me knew this was the natural consequence of her actions. There was no need for direct revenge. I sat alone in the office, took a deep breath, and watched the city through the window, trying to feel my body relax. Gradually, I realized my strategy had worked. She had shown herself for who she truly was, and Jorge would face his own consequences. The feeling of natural justice was both physical and emotional, a deep relief that coursed through my chest and allowed me to finally let go of unnecessary anger. I realized that control over my actions, my ethics, and my planning were far more powerful than any emotional confrontation. My body began to react more calmly, tension diminished, insomnia diminished, anxiety practically disappeared. For the first time, I felt that justice didn't need to be forced. It happened on its own when we followed the right path. During this rebuilding phase, I also needed to strengthen my emotional resilience. I recalled past moments when my father, Jose, remained passive and my mother, Ana, favored Jorge. Each memory caused a tightness in my chest and even a slight headache, but I realized I couldn't let these memories paralyze me. My body reacted physically to each memory, but my mind learned to transform pain into strategy. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and mentally put each situation in perspective, a lesson learned, not a defeat. At the same time, I felt a quiet pride in what I had achieved. My gym membership was secure, my independence intact, my emotional clarity renewed. This mix of sensations, residual physical, tension and mental relief, was constant, but it reminded me that I was alive, strong, and aware of my choices. I also began to look at the future differently. Before, I was consumed by family expectations, demands, and manipulation. Now, every decision was mine, without guilt or fear. I felt the physical sensation of freedom, less tension in my shoulders, a calmer heart, a feeling of lightness in my spine. My mind was alert but serene. My deep, steady breathing indicated that I was finally in control of my destiny. I reviewed my gym plans, expanded projects, and considered investments with a confidence I had never felt before. At the same time, I reflected on my emotional life. Learning to trust my own limits and ethics was liberating. Memories of family manipulation still surfaced, but no longer to paralyze me. They came as a learning experience. It was as if my body and mind finally aligned. Each physical step, each emotional decision, each strategic action converged toward a new, me stronger, more resilient, and more conscious. I realized that my victory was not just against them, but over old patterns that imprisoned me. And for the first time, I felt proud of myself, without needing anyone's approval. Little by little, I began to realize that my story could inspire others. Every detail I experienced, the manipulation, the financial exploitation, the family favoritism, was a life lesson about limits, ethics, and patience. I could feel each memory physically and emotionally. Tension that transformed into strength, fear that transformed into clarity, anger that transformed into strategy. My experience showed that even in extreme situations, it is possible to act intelligently and maintain integrity. Each step of rebuilding strengthened my autonomy and confidence, and my body responded positively. Calmer nights, calm breathing, and a firm posture. I realized that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting or ignoring the pain, but using each challenge as fuel to create a better life. It was a physical and emotional feeling of silent victory, an internal recognition that I had finally learned the most important lesson. Life can be unfair, but our response to that injustice defines our destiny. This phase solidified my strength, showing that patience, discipline, and mental clarity can transform any adversity into a real opportunity for growth. One of the most important lessons I learned from this experience was the need to set clear boundaries. I realized that even with love or family ties, no one has the right to exploit or manipulate. Physically, I felt firmer, my steps more decisive, and a quiet confidence in every gesture. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone but myself. By setting boundaries, I noticed my energy transforming into focus, my anxiety decreasing, and my ability to make strategic decisions increasing. Learning to say no firmly but without guilt was liberating. This learning impacted my professional and personal life, making me more resilient and prepared for any challenge. Finally, I felt my body and mind were aligned, allowing me to live more fully and consciously. Today, looking back, I see that every obstacle, every manipulation, and every moment of exploitation was essential to my transformation. My heart still carries memories of pain, but my mind now understands that these experiences made me stronger, more attentive, and more strategic. I feel my body respond to this awareness. Shoulders raised, chest open, breathing balanced. Emotional clarity and a sense of control over my life allow me to face any challenge without fear. I learned that overcoming isn't just about surviving, but about transforming each difficult situation into an opportunity for growth and personal empowerment. Every time I confront old memories, I feel the physical and emotional difference. Less tension, more focus, more energy to create the life I truly desire. I've also realized that my story can inspire others who feel trapped in complex or toxic family situations. Sharing my experience is a way to show that there is a path to overcoming difficulties, even when all seems lost. It's a physical and emotional process. Feeling the anxiety subside, the body relax, and the mind gain clarity, as it realizes that strategic and ethical choices can turn seemingly untenable situations around. Today, I can walk without fear, look anyone in the eye with confidence, and know that my autonomy cannot be broken. This freedom is the greatest reward for all the suffering I've experienced, and each challenge I've faced has taught me that resilience, discipline, and patience are powerful tools for transformation. In short, my story is about learning to protect myself without losing my integrity, to set clear boundaries, and to transform pain into strength. I still deal with remnants of suffering and difficult memories, but the feeling of personal, emotional, and physical victory is concrete. My heart is lighter, my mind clearer, and my body more aligned with my choices. Today, I can say that I have overcome not only those who tried to exploit me, but also the internal patterns that kept me vulnerable. The ultimate lesson is that no matter how unfair life seems, there is always a way to regain control, empower yourself, and move forward. I learned that justice, boundaries, and strategic resilience are the key to rebuilding your life, even when family becomes enemies.